Recently, I saw a 60 Minutes video on superannuation funds and the fact that a couple of them went bang and lost a whole bunch of cash. And there was a couple of things in their report which I found super interesting, and I wanted to talk about them with you today. If you want to see the full 60 Minutes report, we've got a link in the video description below, so go and have a look at the full report. We're going to watch a little bit of this, and I'm going to make some commentary along the way. We're going to shorten it up so you just get my commentary. So make sure you go and watch the full report for total context of what they're saying. So let's have a look.
Coming up,
The whole of my future has been stolen.
$1 billion superannuation nightmare.
Super fraud.
Thousands of Australians
Super fraud,
affected.
hey?
547,000.
340,000.
1.4 million.
Are their savings gone for good?
It's one of the biggest super collapses ever.
That's next on 60 Minutes.
All right, well, a couple of things first. There's some big numbers there. There's 547,000, 300,000, 1.4 million. Obviously, they go and find the people that lose a lot of money to make these stories work. Nonetheless, that is an extraordinary amount of money for some of these people to lose. And in fact, as it turns out, some of it is just about all their retirement savings, which makes it even worse. So the first thing we've got to look at is that that's a lot of money in one spot that is to be lost. So let's see what else they say.
The superannuation industry in Australia is mostly a fabulous triumph. At last count, the super savings pot was overflowing with more than $4 trillion. That's a lot of zeros and guarantees prosperous retirements for millions.
All right, a couple of things I want to talk about there. 4 trillion. That is an extraordinary number of dollars. And when our current economy is 1.2, 1.3 trillion. We're not quite 3 times. So over 3 times the amount of what's in an average year for GDP is what is in super investment alone. And one of the words she uses there was guarantee. Well, I'd like to say that nothing's ever guaranteed. And doesn't matter if it's in super or not, there's no such thing as a guarantee.
The stories are as heartbreaking as the scale is breathtaking. 12,000 hardworking Australians who did everything right preparing for their retirements, only to be left feeling scammed out of their superannuation savings.
It's a disgrace.
It happened because they were convinced to invest their money into 2 linked but now collapsed super funds. First Guardian, run by David Anderson, and Shield, managed by Paul Kyoto.
All right, so this story is about First Guardian and Shield. If you want to know more about that, I'd suggest you go to Google and find a whole bunch of information about that. But it has been circulating around a lot in the media, and even before that, in the financial planning industry, there was a bit of back whispers of what's actually going on. But First Guardian and Shield, so 2 separate entities that are working on the super.
I'm very, very angry. There has to be something that can be done.
All up, losses could top $1 billion. Right now there are 12,000 Australians who don't have a cent to their savings for their retirement. Will they get anything close to the money back?
I don't want to give investors no hope because I think there is some hope and we are working hard to work out what we can recover. But I don't want to give investors false hope either.
Okay, so that's pretty daunting if you understand how government agencies work and what she's actually saying from an ASIC point of view. So she's effectively saying, I don't want to give you too much hope, but I don't want to give you false hope. So reading between those lines, there's not much hope there at all. There's a couple of things that she mentioned in her comments. There was, I don't want to give them too much hope because I think there is a chance of some recovery. Well, that's obviously nowhere near dollar for dollar recovery that she's even alluding to, let alone promising. Once again, no guarantees in investment and still no guarantees in super.
The news couldn't be worse. But the losses incurred by investors in the First Guardian and Shield funds are a reminder to everyone with a superannuation account. The pool of super money is so enormous, the sharks are circling. And they can't wait to exploit the fact that many of us need as much help as we can get when it comes to managing our retirement funds.
See, I don't know if I totally agree with his point there. he was saying that the pool is so large that the sharks are circling. Look, sharks are circling with little fish or big fish. It doesn't matter. Sharks always need to eat. And unfortunately, whether it's some dodgy transaction on Facebook Marketplace or a part of the $4 trillion worth of super that Australian has under management, there's always going to be dodgy people out there. The point that I think that he's missing out of this comment is that what people need to realise is not that there's sharks out there, is the fact is that you can actually lose money in super, whereas before I've heard people say that they can't, and that's plainly not the case.
This situation that we're dealing with here, I think, is a wake-up call for all of us into the risks that are involved with people making decisions about where their superannuation lies.
People don't want to hear that, do they? Because it's supposed to be the safest investment we make. We need to make super contributions.
And that's why these arrangements or this conduct, Adam, is different in our view and so serious.
You feel like you've been robbed. You feel like the system has robbed you.
All right, before we go on with that, my comments about the reporter and the ASIC lady, I think Sarah, their dialogue there, she's making the point that I raised earlier that you can actually lose money in super. She's just not definitely saying that. But I think that the point that Adam makes, the reporter, is also very valid in that we don't have a choice, that we actually have to do super. If you're a wage earner, you get super. If you're a business owner and you pay yourself a wage, you get super. If you're a business owner and don't, you do trust disbursements or drawings or whatever, then you're kind of crazy not to think about using super anyway. So super is a big part of your life from as soon as you earn money, whether it's 14, 15, 16 years old, whatever, you start earning super, and that goes all the way through to, say, 65, 66, 89, whenever they decide to make the retirement age when you eventually get there. That's a hell of a long time for money to be able to grow and do that sort of thing. So one of the things that you need to look at in your super is actually having a clue about it. And even if it is in a managed fund, in a normal industry super fund, whatever, you got to think about it is actually your money. It's not just some random dollars appearing on a piece of paper somewhere.
You couldn't find someone more unfairly targeted than Susie Jack. She just doesn't deserve what she's suffered.
As COVID hit, we've lost our jobs. Okay, it's happened. Then I was diagnosed with cancer. Okay, I battled through. That was okay. Passed through that. Then my mum got very sick. She recently passed away. And now this super scheme that has happened. It's just a nightmare.
All right. A couple of things there. So they make it sound like some random financial planner called her, and I don't know how those details came out, and her story is absolutely atrocious and tragic. And I don't know if she got onto some comparison website or whatever, but she was doing the right thing by trying to compare moving super. And remember, she had to move because she wasn't eligible for an industry super fund because she didn't work for Qantas anymore, and it's a specific fund for Qantas employees. Thanks for that, Qantas. So she had to move it somewhere, which meant that she's 52 years old. She's probably never really looked much into her super. I don't want to talk for her, but she doesn't give the impression that it was an easy decision for her to make. So she was kind of starting from ground zero, and that took a lot of guts to get online and try and figure that out yourself, right? And that's one of the things that makes this even, just horrible, is that the people don't know where to start, and she's a classic example of that, and it's really, really bad. So she's picked somewhere to start and someone's called her up. Now, is it a random financial planner? Well, it's going to be connected to the inquiry that she's made, and that's how it works. And, of course, this financial planner is going to call her and talk to her about her requirements or what's best for her, bearing in mind that, it's not always just a proper fee for service. There could be other things behind the scenes that's enticing the financial planner to do what they're doing.
Susie admits she doesn't fully understand super. But she felt confident the advice she was receiving about the First Guardian Fund was sound, and so rolled more than $500,000 into it.
It was wonderful people I'm dealing with.
So they really sold it to you? They won you over?
Thinking about it now, yes. I think they did. There was no red flags. I thought it was legit. I thought it was a genuine super.
Industrial scale misconduct.
Industrial scale.
And that's how big it is. There's layers and layers of people involved in this.
So one of the things she talks about there is red flags. If you don't have any idea, she admitted to not having any idea about super, but she said there was no red flags. So if you're unskilled in this area, then it would be very hard to think that you would have a clue about what a red flag would be or what isn't. And that's not her fault. Like, this is not, I am in no way blaming this poor lady. I'm just saying that anyone who operates from a basis of always what they already know, and they don't know anything because she's admitted that, then having red flags or not doesn't really matter, because you're probably not even looking for the right thing to have a red flag about. And it's all about being made to feel comfortable. And some of these people are very salesy, very slick, and that made her feel comfortable. So therefore there was no red flags in her opinion and that's why she would move forward. Just be aware of that when you're doing something. When you're doing any financial transaction, it's not just the actual physical red flags you look through on doing your checks, but it's the gut feel. And, you know, there's a comfort level, there's uncomfortable, there's comfort level, and then sometimes there's too super smooth and slick, and, you know, that's just as bad as being uncomfortable, right? Because there's got to be a reason they're like that.
David Anderson and Paul Kyoto enlisted others to cold call prospective clients.
Someone would call you, it would be a salesperson, and then they would bring in a financial planner on the call live. And it would be a three-way call with you, the financial planner, a person registered, again, under a license to act in your best interests. And instead, allegedly, everyone was getting paid from the top to the bottom to pull you into that particular fund.
Last month, when she happened to look in the spam folder of her email, she found a letter from her fund declaring it was in liquidation.
I read it like a few times and I didn't understand it. And I seen the word liquidation, and then I forward that email to my son, and I asked my son, can you please explain this to me? Because I really don't understand what's happening here.
What was his reaction once you told him what was in that email?
I was like, Mum, you've lost all your money. Your money's gone, Mum. Do you understand?
So that when it hit home?
Yes, it sure did. It was the biggest shock of my life.
That clearly demonstrates the way that they were running the operation, let's call it, where they had a salesperson, they would bring on a financial planner. So they probably had a team of salespeople doing the calling through however they got the leads, who knows, whether it's comparison websites, whether it's database of people, I don't know, who knows. And so they'd call those people up, then they'd warm them up, and they'd get a financial planner on the call, and they'd kind of do this warm handover to the planner while they're on the call there. And so what that does is it's almost like third-party positioning for the planner. So what I mean by that is that there's someone who's built rapport, who's very good at building rapport, say the salesperson, and they're talking to the potential client, and they've got a bit of rapport. Now, subconsciously, that client has a bit of trust in what that salesperson is going to say next, even though they haven't said it yet, because there's a bit of rapport. There's, oh, I got the same age kids, or we got the whatever it might be, right? So then they bring in the financial planner. And by definition, what happens is that by bringing this third party in, the trust that's associated with the salesperson is automatically transferred to the financial planner without the financial planner saying anything, because it's that warm handshake introduction that goes on in those type of arrangements. So the salesperson can spend all the time they want building the rapport with the client. They get that. And the financial planner doesn't have to spend any time building rapport with the client, because they get brought on and straight away that rapport is transferred over to the financial planner. And that's the first thing. And the second thing is then, because they have now positioned them as the expert, then not only the rapport is there, but the ability to listen to what they have to say and pretty much do whatever they say is there because of the rapport that was built through the salesperson. So that is a very common tactic that sales teams use, and it does a couple of things. One is it warms up the client ready for the crunch, let's call it, the sale of the actual product. And secondly, it saves the need. You can ramp up your sales team and only have a small amount of specialists, right? Those financial planner type positions, whatever it is, in whatever industry, that specialist person who gets called in, you don't need anywhere near the number of them as what you need as sales team to get the clients to the point of having that three-way conversation. So this is very much a common way to crunch the client in a deal.
Losing $500,000 doesn't bear thinking about. It's no comfort at all, but she wasn't the only one.
Just thinking how future was, because we'd worked so hard to have that future. And we've had to change it quite substantially.
You can't just earn that money back.
I don't think we'll ever see it back.
You can understand Annette and Simon Luck's despair.
Do the big planned trip across the Nullarbor and take our time and see all the sights as we go across.
Like Susie Jack, their post-work wish to live happily ever after is all but over.
The retirement plan was to do the big lap, which is the dream of merely a lot of retirees, do the big lap of Australia for a couple of years.
How quickly it's all changed. Now, with no retirement savings, Simon and Annette can't even afford to chip in for their daughter's wedding.
Don't have anything to give.
That's got to be about the worst thing for a parent.
It's embarrassing as a father, not being able to give their kids something, just anything. It's embarrassing.
So one of the things that the other couple touched on was that the feeling that they had when they lost the money. And I'm not talking about, I've lost the money. That's a bad feeling. It's the feeling of helplessness to be able to sort it out. But it's also the feeling that's attached with where you had plans and you were secure in a certain way, and you had the ability to do certain things like help your daughter with getting married, helping fund that, and now you can't. There's that feeling of helplessness that isn't just from the losing the money, as in you're helpless in that it was lost for your, on behalf of you, so to speak. But there's a feeling of helplessness that then starts permeating through the rest of your life in all areas. And this severely impacts people's mental health in really, really negative ways. And all these people look like that. I'm not a mental health expert by any stretch of the imagination, but I've definitely dealt with many, many clients over the years in good and really bad financial situations. So you get a bit of a feel for these sort of things when you're talking to someone. And this whole constant worry, or will I sleep? Can I sleep at night? Or will I lose my car, let alone my house? That's something that you don't really think that you're going to need to worry about when you're in your 60s and 70s, and yet these people are. And that's pretty tragic.
They're thieves. Absolutely thieves. How could someone do that to you? Like, how can a human being do that to people?
All right, so she asked a good question there. How could a human being do that to people? Well, when money's involved, all sorts of weird and wonderful things go on, and not so wonderful things, to be honest. A couple of things about that. I have no idea about the ASIC investigation. I'm not an investigative, I don't know, anything really. But what I will say is that there's probably, if these guys have been smart and about this sort of thing, it's going to take a long time to get an answer on where this money's gone or how it's gone. There is a big difference between, say, them sending $240 million offshore, if that's what's happened, and how that was done. I have no idea how that was done, versus paying themselves a massive wage that could afford the mortgage payments on that $9 million house that he's got. So, one was wages and what have you. Then there was cost to run the business and the fund. And then there's like pulling money out to do other things. Well, that's going to be the first port of call that ASIC's probably going to go to in terms of looking where the money's gone. A lot of these things can get eaten up with fees and wages and what have you. That's obviously a little bit harder to put your finger on because that's the operation of a fund or that's the operation of the business. And, you know, it's probably harder for them to say that. But if there's just huge chunks disappearing, well, that's something that they're going to pursue, and who knows where it's gone or what it's doing. That's their job. Nonetheless, the takeout for you on this is, how do you know what's going on in these funds? How do you know how they're run? Is it just off what they tell you on the paper that they send you? That's the first thing that you look at. But is it real? Let's see if we can figure it out.
What strikes me is the systemic nature of it, though. So these aren't your typical shady underworld figures that you're targeting. These are accredited expert professionals. How do we trust a system that enabled that?
Yeah. So I think you're right to ask the question about the breadth of what we are looking at here and the potential systemic nature of what's involved. So there is a deep web of issues to get to the bottom of, and that's what we're doing.
His question was a really good one, and her answer was a typical, almost political answer of like nothing. Didn't answer the question at all. The question relates to, how do we know how far this goes, and how do we know how many other funds are affected, and is my money affected in a fund and I wouldn't even know it? And of course her answer was like a nothing answer. Because she doesn't have an answer. She doesn't know. And ASIC's only going to know at the end when these things start failing. And that's the biggest problem. When you have super funds that are, you know, some of your industry super funds are ginormous and then highly, highly intertwined with unions and all the malarkey that goes on with unions and what have you in this country. You know, unions were so big and still are big in the construction side of things in this country and infrastructure. And now they have their foot and hand and all sorts of parts of their bodies involved in the super funds. That's another inquiry that probably should be looked at for this country because, you know, your union involvement in super funds, they're not doing it because they love you. Let's just put it that way. But this answer here was a nothing answer. Her answer essentially says, we have no idea how wide this goes and we don't know which funds are in trouble till they fail.
But it didn't quite bust it open fast enough. So it started investigating Kyoto in September 2023.
2023?
Yeah, a long time ago. 18 months after his scheme started, already people in the finance world were saying, this guy's getting really big really quickly.
So when we talked earlier about red flags and the client who'd lost the $547,000, she said she didn't know any red flags. And I said that there was probably other people in the space that did have red flags. Sarah, that journalist there, said exactly that. So in only 18 months after that fund was created, people in the financial industry were already saying, that's an extraordinary fast growth rate for that fund. What are they doing and what's going on? The problem with that sort of comment is, well, there's a couple of problems. Let's start with the first one. You're not going to hear that comment unless you shop around, right? And so if you did happen to go to this fund and you got some feedback and then you maybe go to someone else who didn't use this fund or find someone that didn't going to refer there and say, hey, what fund do you recommend and why? And you can start to look at that. That's the first thing. The second thing is that people have almost a confirmation bias that, say you heard about this fund and it was growing and it's great and it's giving these returns, and then you go and see someone else and you say, well, what about it? Oh, no, don't go to that fund. Look, there's whispers around it's growing really quick and we can't figure out why and what's going on. A lot of people think that, well, that's tall poppy syndrome, right? You know, that's professional jealousy because you don't refer to them and you refer to someone else. And whereas in legitimate terms, that guy could have been totally trying to save your bacon. You've already kind of bought into the concept that this fund sounds good and what you're looking for is someone to affirm it. And by him talking against it, you've reversed that by saying, well, he's probably professionally jealous, therefore he is affirming the fund, so I'm going to invest in it anyway. So, you can't do your due diligence like that, but that is what what happens in a lot of situations like this.
I've worked all my life for this. I don't want to spend my life on benefits, living off social payouts and charity. I was looking at starting transition to retirement, but now I can't because, I'm through no fault of my own.
I can't sleep at night. I think about the future. Like, what future do I have? I don't know. It's just, I feel like I'm in a limbo land. I actually thought you could never lose money in the super fund. I trusted the system.
Yeah, okay, all right. So there you go. So let's talk about the dude's comment was, it was through no fault of my own, and I'm not victim blaming here. That is not at all what this is about. This is an absolutely tragic story, and it is atrocious and should not happen. And then this lady's comment about, I didn't think you could lose money in super. Now, what we can all learn from both of those comments is that maybe we need to diversify our super funds around. So instead of the 1.4 million in one fund, because it's pretty hard to know how legit it's actually going behind the scenes, then at least spread it around to an unrelated fund and 2 or 3 or 4. Like, I'm not giving you financial advice, but maybe that will make you feel more comfortable. Just like sometimes you don't have all your money in one bank account, right? So some people have multiple bank accounts at different banks. They feel like they got their savings spread around in case one bank has a hissy or one bank goes belly up, which doesn't really happen here that often, but you know what I mean? You get the idea, right? So the same, why can't we do that with our super? It's like a huge amount of money. Would you have $1.4 million in one bank account if that was your complete life savings? I don't know. Only you can answer that. But that's kind of essentially what he did, and this lady had with her $547,000. And her comment around, I didn't think you'd lose money in super, is not, both of those things is not necessarily a reflection on these people. Let me make that clear. It's a reflection on the way that us as a country perceive super, and it's fundamentally wrong. It is another investment. It's no different to you investing in shares directly. If you had some money and you went to the stock market and put it in shares, unless you were delusional, the answer to my question of, do you think you could possibly lose money in this investment? The answer is, well, yes, I think I might be able to lose money, but I've done my due diligence and I thought this share would perform because of this reason here. It's a mining share, it's a retail share, whatever it might be, right? But a rounded person would answer that question with, yes, and I've looked into it and I'm willing to take the risks. But super has this perception that it is completely infallible, and that as your money goes in there, not only do you put $10 in, you don't just get $10 out, you get $20 out when you come to retire, because it grows and it always goes up. And it's an absolute lie. And these people are clearly stating that here with a comment of, through no fault of my own, and I didn't think you could lose money in super. Both of those things tell me that the failure is on the industry, whether you want to point it at the government, whether you want to point it at marketing, whether you want to point it at whatever. The simple fact is you 100% can lose money in super. So make sure you have a clue about what you're doing, because these poor people sure didn't.
I bet you don't anymore.
No, I don't trust. I don't trust the system anymore.
And that is exactly the answer that you should all have. I love that ending. No, I don't trust the system. Make sure you have a clue about it. This is an atrocious story. Make sure you watch the full video, because we've had to cut it down because it's quite long when I'm rambling on my little bits. But what your takeaway should be is, do not trust the system. Make sure you have a clue about what's happening with your money, because no one cares about your money any more than you do. That's it from me. I'll see you next time.